Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for our first webinar in a few months about the Innovation Intelligence tool. So my name is Riley Zipper. I'm joined by Tim Slaper and Carol Rogers. And I'm going to turn it over to Tim to get us started.
Hello, I'm Tim Slaper, co-director of the IBRC and the research director. And as you can imagine, there's been quite a bit of research that has gone into the Innovation Intelligence tool. And this is the third iteration of providing data and analysis and distillation of innovation and the data that can provide a window into how innovative a region is. And you'll note that we're calling this innovation intelligence as opposed to index, because we want to, shall we say, expand the boundaries of what this is for. It's not simply an index to compete with another place that, or you might want to compare yourself against, but it is to provide knowledge and insight and intelligence about the forces and dynamics of innovation activities and outputs in a region. So like the slide says here, we're looking at innovation capacity as well as the kind of tangible outputs of a region regarding innovation. And if you came hoping that this would be just one number, we have an index that's just one number on innovation. I hate to say this, but you've come to the wrong place. There is a headline index, which is the one number, which is a synthesis or an aggregation of many different types of indices and data. But the idea is that we want people to be able to drill down and learn more about their region and other regions that they want to compare themselves to as well. So Riley, you can move on to the next one. There you go. As I mentioned, that there is a headline index that is that one number, but it's comprised of several components, if you will, or categories. The input side relates to knowledge creation, human capital, education, things like that. Another one would be the business dynamics of, say, establishment formation, foreign direct investment, for example. And then other elements in terms of the business profile would include measures that would provide some history of, are these large, is this region have particularly large establishments or industries, or are they biased towards smaller ones? It would give you a sense of the cluster profile, for example, and it would also provide some background on the degree to which clusters have been growing in one's region. And then when it comes to the outputs, everybody needs to have some sort of measure or metric on performance. And our measures of output would be employment, it would be productivity, income, earnings, those are sorts of measures. And then kind of a higher level would be the economic well-being as it relates to, say, migration into a region, or other elements that would kind of indicate the kind of ripple effects of, if we're a thriving region with a lot of innovation, we would expect that the overall economic well-being would be improving over time. I think you're up next, aren't you, Riley?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So this slide sort of distills how the index itself is structured. So as Tim mentioned, we do have a headline number that is a combination of a lot of different measures, which are built up to form what we call sub-indexes, which are organized around more precisely defined concepts than the core indexes. So this slide is just sort of an example of the hierarchy. You can see in the blue to the right are the measures that are built into the Human Capital and Knowledge Creation Core Index. And you can see how that kind of feeds into the sub-index, which are, like I said, organized into more precise concepts. And then finally, that is baked into 5 core indexes. So what you see here is a breakdown of the Human Capital and Knowledge Creation Core Index, and how that combined with these other 4 core indexes eventually builds into the headline index. And though we do have one headline overall index of innovation, we do encourage you all to not focus just solely on that number, and to instead focus on how everything kind of works together, and how everything is built up into that distillation of the headline index. But we'll talk a little bit about that more fully when we get to the demo. But first, we're going to have Carol talk a little bit about some of the additions, the new content that we've added into innovation intelligence.
Hey, thanks so much, Riley. Yes, it's all new updated data. If there was one thing that we have heard from users is they wanted us to modify the index in a way that it could be updated at least on an annual data. So that will be there. It will be scheduled. Some of the measures when they're released vary throughout a year. So we're going to pick, and Riley, I think it was maybe March that seemed to be the optimal time of year, but don't pin me down on that right now without talking to the team. We've also added new measures to the index, including a measure of latent innovation, and looking at latency as a capacity indication for a region, as well as adding broadband use and access, and we're pleased with our partners at Purdue University who were able to contribute that to this effort. We've redesigned the interface. We had really focused on the user. And for any of you who are attending today, if you were part of our testing community earlier this year, we're going to thank you again. Many people, especially state level economic development organizations, state officials, are going to be very pleased that most, not all, but most of the indices now are available for states, including that headline index. And one thing that was really important to people is downloadable measures, not just the index value, but give us the actual measures that you used around the prime working age population, the patent diffusion, the knowledge spillovers, all of those measures, as well as their index value, are now downloadable. So I talked a little bit about the user-centered design. This was very important to us. It was also very important to EDA, and they supported us wholeheartedly with this, that we ensure that folks all across the country, organizations large and small, be tested or allow us to effectively watch them while they're using the tool. And so we've built that into the new interface. But you know what? It's always an iterative thing. We never stop trying to perfect things. And you will see even changes to this because we're working on a new edition called a trend line. Is that what Michael's calling it, Riley?
The trends view.
Yeah, trends view to add. So always stay tuned, especially to our emails and webinars. So there are going to be two ways to interact. So Riley is the master of the demo, and I'm going to be manning the chat. And as chats come in, things that I can answer right away, I will do that. Ones that might be a little bit tougher or that need Tim, will hold off for the feedback session. But essentially, you're going to have 10 ways, or 2 ways, sorry, 2 ways to give us feedback. Next slide. So I want to give you a pitch right now and tell you that this is really easy. We've also modified the map so that the map itself is selectable. But all you got to do is, number one, choose what kind of geography. Am I going to be looking for a county because I'm a county economic development office? Or do I want a metro area because I'm really serving a region? Or are you an economic development district? You can choose one of those 3. And as I mentioned now, new is states. So you can also choose states. Once you tell us what geographic unit you want to look at, and there's a reason for this that Riley will explain later. Start typing in the name of a geography: Chicago, San Francisco, Milwaukee, you name it, just start typing it in and it will give you a drop down and you can pick your geography. It will show up in red on the map, and then you can decide whether you just want to look at every place, regardless of which county, or if you want to compare everything to yourself, and off you go. So let's get started, Riley.
Okay. Yeah, switch us over to the demo now.
All right, there you go.
So when you go to StatsAmerica, you'll see, if you haven't visited StatsAmerica, you might see some changes since that we've made in the past few months as part of our full website redesign. But you can get to Innovation Intelligence from the homepage, or you can just navigate up here to Tools and click on it right here. But you'll see, instead of a landing page, we just have sort of a short description of what Innovation Intelligence is, and then you can jump right into it. So as Carol mentioned, the first thing you need to do is you need to select a geography type. Counties is selected by default, and I'm going to leave it there because we're going to look at a county today. You can either type or just click on the map a geography you'd like to use. I'm going to choose Bartholomew County, Indiana, for the purposes of this demo. And then you can choose a thematic view, which I'll talk about a little bit here in a little bit, but we're going to start here with the standard view. And the standard view is probably what you've come to expect out of any field map. You get just a map that's colored in darker shades, meaning a higher headline innovation index, lighter shades meaning a lower index value. And by default, the headline index is selected, but you can go through here and click on any of the folders to get to the 5 core indexes if you just select on the folders themselves, or you can expand the folders, and then you can kind of dig into all the different myriad measures that we have here. So if you want to get started on human capital and knowledge creation, expand that folder, and then you're presented with the 3 sub-indexes that we have within that core index. And if you want to dig even further, you can expand the sub-index folders. And then you see the individual measures that are contained within that sub-index. So clicking through will, as you might expect, will change what measure is presented on the map. Then let's go ahead and expand all these out just so you can see all the different measures that we've incorporated into the innovation index. So let's go back here to the headline number, and I'm going to talk about the map more, but I'll just scroll down just for 1 second so you can get a sense of what the headline innovation index is for this county. So we present it here, right here on the innovation profile. You can see what the index value is. You can see the rank out of 3,110 counties. Bartholomew is 544th. And then you can get a sense of where you're selected, where you sit in the grand scheme of things. So let's go back up to the map. So I mentioned before that you can choose between a standard and a comparative view, these are features that we did have on Innovation Index 2, but the comparative view was not as clear, not as obvious as we like to make it. This was a feature that ended up being really popular among our testing participants. So we wanted to emphasize it. So let's go ahead and go over to this comparative view. So you see a map that might look a little unusual to you at first, but it's quite simple once you understand it. So whichever county you selected, it will rescale. The map will basically rescale to where your region is the center of the universe, so to speak. So you can see that since I selected Bartholomew County, the whole map will change colors, change in scale to where you can see where every other county in the US compares relative to Bartholomew County. So if the counties in yellow are going to be below Bartholomew, the counties in dark blue are going to be above, but then the counties in light blue are going to be within 10 points, either higher or lower than Bartholomew County. And this is the headline index. So Bartholomew County is at 126. So within 10 would be 116 to 136. Above is greater than 136, and then below is less than 116. So right here, you can kind of see kind of a really powerful way to use this comparative map is finding peer regions, for example. So if you want to look at some places that are pretty close to Bartholomew County, you just look for those that have this kind of a light blue color. And I think the really powerful part about the comparative map is just that really obvious pattern that you can see. And like with the standard map, you can click through the core indexes, the sub indexes, and the measures to get a sense for how Bartholomew County compares to the rest of the country on any of the measures. So one thing that I know about Bartholomew County, as having lived there in the past, is that they have one major employer called Cummins. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. They produce engines. So Cummins is a major employer in the region, and they have a lot of high-tech jobs, a lot of production jobs, but really they're kind of pivoting toward automating their production process. So they have a lot of IT, a lot of really high-tech jobs. And that is made immediately evident, really, if you look in the STEM education and occupation subindex. So if you click on that, you can scroll down and read the description of it. So it focuses on STEM workers. science, technology, engineering, and math. And you can see that Bartholomew County is doing pretty good when it comes to STEM workers and to STEM degrees. So you can really see that Bartholomew County is really a regional, even nationwide leader when it comes to STEM. And then you can click through and see how each of these individual indexes kind of feed into this sub-index, or how each of the individual measures feed into the sub-index. Now, this first one is STEM degree creation. So this has to do with, are there educational institutions within the county that produce a lot of STEM graduates? Now, Bartholomew County does not have a major university. It has IUPUC, Indiana University, Purdue University, Columbus, which is a regional campus of IU, but there's really not a lot of STEM degree production that takes place that comes out of IUPUC. So it's really low on this one. But if you look into the other components of the sub-index, I mean, wow, it's incredibly high. So you can see that Bartholomew County scores one of the highest in the country, actually. The range for the index is between 50 and 200. So if someone is up at 200, that means you're about as high as it gets. So Bartholomew County at 199, it really can't get any better than that. You can see that the vast majority of the country is below Bartholomew County. So you can see that it's in a really strong position when it comes to STEM occupations. And the same can be said for high-tech industries. So it's just kind of an interesting thing that you can really, that makes itself really clear whenever you look at the comparative. And I really encourage you all to play around with this, especially maybe look at a region that that you're familiar with, and see kind of how it stands in relation to the rest of the country. So just an example, maybe we can click on employment and productivity. Bartholomew County is doing pretty good. It's kind of around the middle of the pack, I'd say, with employment productivity. But like I said, you can look through the individual components that make up that index, and then maybe start to get a little bit more of a fuller picture about where you stand in relation to the rest of the country. So like Carol mentioned, we have a couple new measures, one of which is latent innovation. So like we mentioned before, if you're not sure what one of these measures is, scroll down and you can see how you can see a short description of it. Industry diversity, and then finally some more economic well-being also contains one of our new measures around broadband. So we have two new broadband measures. Bartholomew County is doing pretty good on that measure. So after the session, like I said, I do encourage you all to just kind of play around and see what you can see with some regions you're familiar with, maybe some you're not familiar with, and like I mentioned, the really powerful use of this comparative view in particular is finding some peers. So maybe if you're a county government, if you're an EDD, you likely have a pretty good idea about what some of your peers are, but this comparative view might be able to kind of alert you to some more peers that maybe you didn't realize you had. People in Bartholomew County probably compare themselves to, some other manufacturing hubs across the country. Howard County, Indiana, for example, is a big manufacturing area in Indiana. They might compare themselves with. But there's also some other places that might emerge from this comparative view that people hadn't really considered before. So let's move on to the innovation profile. So we already talked about this first section. It gives you the headline index, your rank, and your positioning in the rest of the country, kind of where you stand. You can see that Bartholomew County is moderate when it comes to innovation capacity, but it's kind of at the higher end of moderate. You can see, the middle is right around, the median is probably right around here. Bartholomew County is doing a little bit better. And I should mention that the range for how low, moderate, and high innovation is determined, the bottom 15% would be marked as low when it comes to innovation capacity. The middle 70% will come up as moderate, and then the highest 15% will show up as high here in this text. You also see some demographic, economic details, just a little summary of population, income here in Bartholomew County, and of course the largest city. And now moving further down the innovation profile report, you can see each of the 5 core indexes. You can see the index value for each and the rank out of 3,100 counties. Where does Bartholomew County sit when it comes to each of these core indexes? For most of them, looks like Bartholomew County is near the middle, maybe the top end of the middle for some of them, especially this one with human capital. If you look at the top measures for this index and the key takeaways, you'll see high-tech industry employment share, and then STEM occupations are both like kind of like we were looking at in the map. Bartholomew County, because of its reliance on one major high-tech employer, ranks pretty highly on high-tech industries and high-tech or knowledge occupation clusters. But because there's not a large degree, not a large STEM degree granting educational institution that won STEM STEM degrees awarded, is kind of dragging down Bartholomew County a little bit, even though the other 2 measures in that index, it ranks pretty highly. You can see all the other core indexes and some key takeaways. So what the key takeaways shows is just sort of an overall, here's where Bartholomew County is in this index. And then you see the top measures for the index. So out of all the measures in the business dynamics index, you can see that the top measures is traded sector establishment burst, and then high-tech establishment, early in life cycle establishment ratio. And if you want to learn more about what these measures are, you can just scroll up here and you can see which one, you can see a short definition down here. So moving on, business profile, kind of, it looks a little low, but it's actually a little bit higher than your average county. Ranks 512 out of 3,100. And then finally, you can see these last 2, employment and productivity and economic well-being. Bartholomew County is actually quite high in economic well-being. Ranked 317th out of 3,100. And as a result, you'll see that in the key takeaways, it's a high standard of living. There's someone who's unmuted. It looks like their name is Serrano. I'll go ahead and mute him. There we go. Moving on. Finally, our last section here is comparisons. So the last innovation index, we had comparisons as well, but they were not buried, but they were not emphasized as much. So in this new innovation intelligence, by putting everything here on one page, it makes makes it so our users are really able to see each component of the tool. So the county you've selected will immediately present itself here in the table, but you can add new counties as you wish just by typing them. And I don't believe there's any limit to how many counties you can add. Though one thing that we do really want you to exercise caution with is that the index is built so that each geography is compared to only other geographies of the same type, the same unit of analysis. So so when you see Bartholomew County is 126 on the headline index, that's relative to all other counties. You shouldn't compare the index of Bartholomew County with a metro level index, for example, or a state level index. We built it so comparisons really only make the most sense if you compare apples to apples. You compare a county to a county or a metro to a metro. We do allow you to add a different kind of geography there in the table if you really want to, just so you want to see, sometimes people wanted to see how their county might sit in relation to their state. So you can put Bartholomew County, Indiana up here, as well as the state level Indiana index. But drawing conclusions from that, taking action on that type of comparison, we probably wouldn't advise it. We really only advise comparing apples to apples. But the comparison table still nonetheless has a lot of value because you can see maybe if you have some peer regions you'd like to compare yourself to, or maybe you have some peers that kind of stood out in the comparative map. You can add them here to the table. And as you scroll down, you can click on the info boxes to see the definitions of the measures, just like you could above. All of the measures, core indexes are here in the blue, the sub indexes are in the gray, and then the individual measures are here in the white fields. And that's the comparison table. And finally, like Carol mentioned, we do have some more download functionality than we had before. So new on our revamped StatsAmerica.org is a download center. So this is a centralized location for all data downloads that we offer on the site. Instead of having to go to the individual pages to get downloads, you can just go to one place. And conveniently, we link to it here. Clicking on download data will take you to the download center. But you can also find it up here in the header by clicking on downloads. So all the data sets that we offer for download are right here. Scrolling down a little bit will get you to Innovation Intelligence. You just click here to download. And what this gives you is it gives you a zip file where you can download indexes for metros, counties, states, EDDs, but you can also download the measures themselves. So like Carol mentioned, one very commonly requested feature was being able to download the individual measures themselves, just so you can kind of get a little bit of context. You have an index that might be 120. Well, what does that really mean? That's best understood within comparing with other places, but you can also see what the individual data point is, what that measure actually is. So for the first time, we offer that with Innovation Intelligence. And one more thing I want to mention before we get to the feedback is that on the Innovation Intelligence page, there are 2 additional tabs up here. So the About page will just give you a little bit of information about what's new in II3, and then a little bit of context for what the innovation index is, some of the the research underpinnings, some of the context for it. You can get a list of the measures. And then finally, you can also get to some of the reports that we've put together. So here on the reports tab, you can get to our original Driving Regional Innovation report from 2016, which was the report that went along with the II2 that just describes some of the research that went into all this, and also describes the measures more fully, offers some sources for why we decided to include these measures, and some additional resources. And then this other report is a supplement to that 2016 report that lists some of the changes we made more fully from the previous version,